Good evening, everyone. Thanks for showing up. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road2College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. And tonight, I'm going to talk about it. The title was that I was going to talk about the common data set, and I definitely am. But I'm also going to talk about merit scholarships, which is tied into the common data set because that's where you get that information, and also about loans because unfortunately families need to understand the changes that have happened or going to go into place in July 2026 because it may impact the way you search for colleges. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the financial aid formula because actually all of these things are tied together. So there's a lot that I'm going to go through tonight. I might go through kind of fast, but this is recorded. You'll get the link tomorrow, and feel free to ask questions. So with that, let's get started. I'd love for people to put into the chat where they're watching from, what year in high school their student is, because I know we sent this invitation out to a range of parents, definitely a lot with seniors. I know we also sent this out to parents of juniors and maybe even some sophomores. So I'd love to know who's here tonight. And if you want to just put in, if you've heard about the common data set, that's great. If you haven't, you will learn about it tonight. Okay, great. I always love seeing people from all different parts. Wow, somebody from Bangkok. Thank you for showing up. I don't even know what the time zone difference is, but I can just imagine it's a lot. Oh, wait. Wow. Okay. So one other piece of housekeeping is that this is technically a Zoom meeting. And if you really want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you can. But if you don't have a question to ask, it'd be best if you can keep yourself muted so we don't hear any background noises. So I'm going to get started and I will watch the chat for your questions along the way. Let me share my slides. Hold on. Okay, here we go. And let me get my chat back up. Okay, so if you can just do me a favor, somebody put in like a thumbs up or I want to make sure that you're seeing my slides because I'm sharing them I have like a few different monitors going tonight. Great, thank you. Okay, let's get started. So as I mentioned, I'm actually going to talk about student loans. I think you'll understand as I walk through it. We're going to talk about what SAI is, your college budget, how you use this information to determine if you might be eligible for need-based aid versus merit scholarships. I'm going to give a quick example of merit scholarships. Then we're going to get to, I realized, sorry, I don't even have it on the agenda, but we are talking tonight about the common data set. And then I'll show you our platform, Insights, which makes this easier, hopefully, for you to do the research. So why do we focus on merit scholarships? And why am I also even talking about loans tonight? Because when you think about it, there's really only three, sorry guys. Okay, there's three main buckets that people can draw from to pay for college. The first is your own family contribution. Hopefully people have been able to save, but of course we know that there's a lot of things that might get in the way for that. But basically, there might be some savings that you're drawing from. You could also potentially be cash flowing some of this by being a little bit more careful with your spending and kind of using it from your current income. The next big bucket of money is free money. Of course, we want to maximize free money. That's why we're talking about the things we are tonight. And the biggest category of free money actually comes directly from the college. And that is in the form of need-based aid, if your family might be eligible for that, and also merit scholarships. There's a saying we use a lot, and basically the largest scholarship that your student will get is from the college they attend. I know there's always a lot of talk about private scholarships. Where can my student get private scholarships? People should, and students can and should look for private scholarships. Private scholarships tend to be much smaller. They tend to be in the, anywhere from a few $100s to a $5,000 size. They also tend to not be renewable. So if your student gets a private scholarship one year, they have to continue to do that work to find a different scholarship next year. But it's definitely worth doing private scholarships, but it's not going to be the major source that's going to cover a big gap. And it won't stack up in the same way in terms of the dollar amounts versus need-based aid or merit scholarships. So you always want to kind of put your effort that's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. And obviously that by finding the schools that can be generous to your student because of need-based aid or generous with merit scholarships, that's really where you're going to get the most money. And then the last category is if you don't have enough money from family contribution, and even though you might have tried your hardest and you might have still gotten either need-based aid or merit scholarships, there could still be a gap. And so the only way to fill that remaining gap is to look for borrowed money. Most people go for student loans. Of course, there are other vehicles. You could, do a HELOC on your home. I mean, we don't really get into that. I won't talk about that at all tonight, but I mean, those are possibilities. But the majority of people, if there's a gap, are going to use student loans. They're going to try and use whatever the government is offering, which unfortunately is going to decrease starting July 2026. And then if they can't get enough from the government, they will have to go to private lenders. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the quick landscape of where parents and families get their funds to pay for college. Okay, so let's talk about borrowing and what your student can get on their own from the federal government. So this has actually been in place for many years, over 10, 15 years, and this is not changing as of July 2026. So your student can still borrow their freshman year, $5,500, sophomore year, $6,500, and junior and senior year, $7,500. That's really a total of $27,000 over 4 years. There is a max that students can borrow, $31,000. The difference is they might get a little extra money if they go a fifth year, but most students are not getting the $31,000. You should really focus on most students, if they need to borrow, are going to max out at $27,000. And that's all your student can borrow on their own without a cosigner. So if you're kind of coming up with what your budget is for how much you can, or both how much you can afford to pay for college and how much you're willing to pay for college, if you want your student, or if you want to consider that your student might borrow, you can factor in the $27,000 over 4 years, that your student can get from the government. Again, that's up to you whether you want your student to be borrowing or not. Some people may not have the choice. That's the only way they're going to maybe meet and make some of these numbers. And other families might not, their student might not have to borrow, depending on the budget that they have and depending on the colleges that their student applies to. But I just want people to understand that there's always been this misconception, well, my student will be able to get money. Sure, they can, but not that much. So this is helpful, but this isn't going to cover major gaps if you don't have enough money to pay for college. Okay, so here are the changes that are going into place in July 2026, which, quite honestly, for families on this call, if you've got a senior, a junior, anybody younger, this is impacting you. The first one, which I'm not going to go into detail because it really relates to graduate school, but basically students are going to be, if your student goes on to graduate school, whether it's a regular graduate school program or a professional program like medical school, law school, veterinary school, there are lifetime caps that they won't be able to borrow more than, in this case, the $257,000 really relates to if you're going on to professional schools like medical school. If you're going on to a different type of graduate program, the cap is lower. I think it's like around $135,000.
Hey, Siri.
So that's just a change, but I'm not going to go into detail because, as you're trying to think about undergraduate, this isn't as big of a deal. Although I have had a lot of families reach out who, they have a student who knows that they want to go on to medical school already or know that they want to go on to law school. So it is important to know these lifetime caps, and you should, of course, factor that in. We advise people to factor that in even before these changes to student loans, but now it's even more important to factor in the cost of undergraduate. And if your student's going to go on to an expensive graduate school profession, you need to kind of balance what undergraduate's going to cost versus what is left both in your budget and your borrowing capacity to help pay for graduate school. Okay, but the most important change is this column on the right. So there is a loan called the Parent Plus loan, which up until July 2026, parents could borrow. There were no lifetime caps, and parents could borrow the difference between what they could borrow up to the cost of attendance. So if the college costs $70,000 and the school, let's say, might be giving the family $20,000, so the net cost was $50,000, a family could, in theory, borrow the full $50,000 from the government in a Parent Plus loan for 4 years. If they had no money and the college cost $80,000 and the college wasn't giving any money, in theory, a family could borrow up to $80,000 a year for 4 years from the federal government in a Parent Plus loan. So the access to funds was, in theory, good for parents, or in the sense that, they didn't, they always had a fallback of some place where they could borrow money. But quite honestly, I'm in this belief that the Parent Plus loan has probably caused more damage than harm over the past, few years, because parents did get themselves into financial difficulties because they overborrowed. There was very, very, very little oversight into whether or not, a family was overborrowing, and there's very little review of a family's, credit worthiness if they're going to borrow the Parent Plus loan. So this is where, if you heard in the press and, the increase of student loans, actually the increase in student loans was less from undergraduate student loans and much, much more in the Parent Plus sector. So I can kind of understand why this was focused on, but it was probably clamped down a little too tightly, a little too soon. And here's the change that's happening. So going forward, starting in July 2026, it will start with the families that have seniors right now. You will only be able to borrow a maximum per student of $65,000 for your student's undergraduate 4 years. And that breaks down even more further, that you as a parent will only be able to borrow $20,000 a year. And so if you do the math doesn't kind of like add up. You're not actually going to be able to borrow $20,000 for 4 years. You can only borrow $20,000, excuse me, for 3 years. And then your last year, you're only going to be able to borrow $5,000. So you've got to keep this in mind. If you know you might need to borrow money because, your savings, your budget isn't going to cover enough of the cost of attendance. And this is also going to mean that probably more families should be really stringent and do their homework to find colleges that can offer the student merit scholarships or need-based aid if you fall into that category, because that's going to be the biggest lever that you have to lower the cost of college. So as you can see, in total, over 4 years between what your child can borrow and what you can borrow, it's $92,000. And unfortunately, we've all now seen the costs of colleges. I don't know of many colleges that you can go to over 4 years if you're going to do the traditional, on campus, in dorm living, where you can get away with a 4-year degree that's $92,000 or less. So again, just want to make people aware of these numbers and that you factor that in when you think about what you can afford, what you might need to borrow, and what the cost of the colleges your student is applying to. Okay, yeah, so somebody's saying the student loan caps are concerning. Completely agree. What are students that have aspirations of going to medical school supposed to do? Well, so what I've just described is money that, or loans that your student and you can borrow from the government. If your student's going on to any sort of graduate program, medical school, any sort of, a master's in finance, anything like that, they are going to have to, they will get some money in what they call unsubsidized loans for graduate students, but the majority of students are now going to have to borrow private loans to finance their graduate degree. And just again, to kind of make parents aware, the likelihood is that private lenders are going to continue to want somebody to co-sign on those private loans for students going to graduate school. So, so just be aware. Yes, somebody has said medical schools are free. I honestly think there's less than 5 that are free. So, and the competition to get into a free medical school is intense. Definitely go for it, but it's it's a hard seat to be able to get, but I commend the medical schools that have made themselves free. Okay, so let's keep going because let's see, there's a lot to do. So the next section is that I have is about your SAI and your budget. And it's really, actually, I should call it, this is my section on know your numbers. So the numbers that everybody needs to be aware of is cost of attendance, which is the full cost of the sticker price of what a college costs. It's room and board and any other additional fees. And these are estimates, but usually at the higher end of what the full in cost would come to. Your student aid index, for those of you who have who maybe don't have seniors, so you haven't kind of immersed yourself in all of this knowledge yet. The student aid index is the output of what you get when you fill out the FAFSA. So as the acronym says, it's called the student aid index, and really it's to put everybody on an index. So whatever my number is, let's say it comes out to be 50,000. If somebody else has a number that's 40,000, all that's really saying is that I have more financial capability to pay for college than the family who has 40,000. So it's kind of on an index to compare everybody. Whatever your student aid index number comes out to be, that's not the number that college is going to cost you, but it tells the colleges how financially resourceful you are relative to other families. So that's just a quick explanation. I'm not going to go through the formula of the student aid index tonight. We actually have another webinar that we do that talks all about the formula in depth, and quite honestly, the October 1st is when FAFSA opens up. And as we get closer to October 1st, and in the month of October, we also do a lot of webinars related to FAFSA and SAI and how it's calculated. So be on the lookout for those webinars. I will say one other thing about FAFSA. We did a webinar just the other week with the new CEO of an organization called NAFSA, NAFSAA, which is the National Organization for Financial Aid Administrators. I think I'm missing a word in that title, but basically she was amazing and explained a lot about the changes that I went over very quickly about financial aid. And one of the things she said, which I thought was a great little tip, is she said somebody asked in the webinar, I don't have a senior. I think that person had a sophomore in high school, and they wanted to know if they could fill out the FAFSA to see what their SAI is. And she was like, absolutely, go ahead. So I thought that was a great tip. Anybody here, you don't have to wait until your student is a senior. Go to studentaid.gov right now. If you want to create and fill out a FAFSA to see what your SAI is, go for it. She said there is no harm. In fact, actually what happens is because you don't add any colleges to your FAFSA because you're not actually sharing the information with colleges at this point, it just gets deleted, at the end of the year and you would start anew. So I think that's a really good piece of advice for all families. I mean, even if you have a senior now, you can go and use the FAFSA. It's not the official FAFSA that you're going to use for financial aid for next year, but fill it out and see what your SAI is. Because one last thing about the calculation, the majority of the calculation is based on your adjusted gross income. So if your adjusted gross income is not changing year to year, and if your student is a sophomore, your SAIs, whatever you get as sophomore, is probably going to be close to what you're going to get when your student is a senior. So it's better to see that number now. Okay, so that's SAI. Family need is what the colleges determine based on looking at your SAI and their costs of attendance. Oh, sorry. So here, the association is called NAFSA. And if you want to go to the Road to College YouTube channel, we have a link to the webinar we did with, her name is Melanie Story. Thank you. So what colleges do when they get your student aid index is they do this simple calculation. They subtract your student aid index from their cost of attendance. And the difference is your family need. So if you have a student aid index or SAI that is less than the cost of attendance, that's going to show that you have need. There could be, in some cases, that family's SAI is higher than the cost of attendance. So if my SAI, for example, could be 100,000 and the cost of attendance at a school is 70,000, well, by definition, I'm not going to have any need because my SAI says I can afford to pay for that college. So the colleges use your family need to determine whether or not you should be eligible for need-based aid. One thing, let me just quickly say, is just because your numbers say you have need doesn't always mean that the college has enough money and is going to give you money towards your need. So these are kind of like, there's different layers that are happening. First, you have to know your SAI. Then, depending on the colleges that your student is applying to, the cost of attendance varies. So at one school, if the cost of attendance is low, or let's just say it's $40,000 and your SAI is $50,000, then you're not going to have any need. But at another school, if the cost of attendance is higher, like $70,000, at that school, you will have need. So whether or not you have family need is going to vary school to school, and whether or not the school is going to help you with your family need is also going to vary school to school. And these are the numbers that we're going to be able to find and look at in the common data set. Okay, and then the last number, which I think is just as important as all the above, is your family's budget. So if you take away everything that we just talked about, what the government thinks you can afford, what the school's cost of attendance is, you should, before going into this process, and this is a perfect thing for a family with a sophomore or junior, is sit down and just decide, either based on how much you have saved or based on how much you value sending your student to certain types of colleges, just figure out what your family's budget is. And I'll give a quick example. We worked with a family a few years ago where, quite honestly, they were, pretty well off, but the father had determined that even though he could probably afford to completely pay for any college, he wanted to have a budget of $40,000. That's what he wanted to spend to send his daughter to college. And it was based on a lot of issues. They had a child with special needs, that they knew that they were going to have to support. They had, elderly parents that they were supporting. And they also knew that their daughter was interested in going to medical school. So they wanted to save money for that. So he went into this process knowing that his budget was like $45,000, and he stuck to it. And it didn't matter that he could pay more. That's the number he used to guide the types of schools that his daughter ultimately applied to. So just it's important to figure out what your family's budget is, as well as to know all these other numbers. Okay, so somebody's saying, when discussing need, what makes you eligible for scholarships that require you to have financial need? Well, I'm not sure if you're referring to scholarships from colleges or from private scholarships, but scholarships from colleges, if you have need, it's going to be based on this calculation of your cost of attendance minus your SAI. So if you have family need, then the college, it might also kind of layer on top of that and say, how strong of a student is your student? How badly do we want this student? And then the combination of the two, how much need you have and how strongly the school wants your student, might help might make the college determine how much of your family's need it's going to help cover. Okay, so I also have twins entering next year. How does that affect SAI? I wish I had good news, but unfortunately for families with twins or families with multiple students in college at the same time, you were dealt a blow 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, the FAFSA, the calculation for student aid index was the formula was recalculated, and they came up with new ways of doing the formula. One of the things they took out of the formula was, in the past, if you had multiple students in college at the same time, which would be twins, or you could have had students 2 years apart, they would take your family's SAI and they would divide it by the number of students that you had in college at the same time. So literally, if your family's SAI was 60,000, then that meant each student's individual SAI was 30,000. People felt, and I actually didn't feel this way, but people in government and other places felt that families who had multiple students in college at the same time were getting some sort of financial break that the rest of us weren't getting, because somehow when you had your multiple students, you had your multiple kids, you knew that this was coming, which none of us did, and they took that away. So as of 2 years ago, every student has their own individual SAI, and the fact that you have multiple students in college at the same time, unfortunately, doesn't impact it. The one thing you can do, but it's going to vary college by college, is you can appeal to colleges after you get your awards, or your student gets their financial aid or merit scholarships, and you can go back to the college and say, hey, I know you didn't factor this in, but I do have multiple students in college at the same time. Would you give us additional aid for that? There are definitely schools that are doing that, but it's a case-by-case basis. So, okay, I'm going to keep moving. What time is it? Okay. Oh, okay. We got half an hour more. So here's a table, actually, that a partner that I work with put together. And this is just to give you a quick idea of where you might fall relative to this idea of will you potentially get financial aid from a college or not. This is just ballpark. It's just to give you a quick look. And it uses the two biggest components of the FAFSA calculation, or the SAI calculation, and that is parent income, adjusted gross income, and parent assets. So there's actually 4 categories or quadrants to the formula. The 4 categories are parent income, parent assets, student income, student assets. Majority of the time, students have no income or very low income, and they have very little assets. So that's why, to do these quick estimations, we really focus on the parent income and the parent assets. And this is non-retirement. And again, this is just to give you a sense based on your SAI. And so you can see that everything in the yellow, if you fell within the yellow, if you had like income that was 150,000 or less, and you had assets that were 300,000 or less, you're pretty likely to probably get aid from a lot of schools. You can see if you are in that income range of like 200,000 to really 300,000, depending on your assets, you might still get aid, but it's starting to kind of get to the boundary of not getting aid. And then you can see basically if your family earns 300,000 and above, and you have, nice assets of 350,000 and above, it's probably unlikely that you are going to get aid at any college. And so the reason why I put this out here is, again, to kind of make it families or parents more aware that if you're in that red zone, then the only way you are going to lower your costs of college is for your student to apply to a college where they are likely to get merit scholarships. And then that merit scholarship is basically a discount on the sticker price of the college, and that is going to reduce your cost. So if you're in this red zone, you're not going to get need-based aid. Your only way of reducing the cost of college is by finding the colleges where your student is most likely to be offered merit scholarships. And we're going to talk about how we do that, and that's where we're going to use the common data set. Are 529s considered parent assets? Yes, they are. Okay. Does property impact SAI? No, it does not. Your primary house is not factored into the SAI. If you had, investment properties, it would be considered an asset. So other types of property that's not your primary home would be part of SAI. But the other category, the other form, which I'm not going into detail tonight, is kind of like a parallel or a sister form to the SAI, and it's called the CSS profile. And colleges that give a lot of need-based aid ask families to fill out the CSS profile because it asks more detailed questions than what the questions are on the FAFSA form. So those questions for the CSS profile will include the value and the equity of your primary home as part of their calculation. So in one form, the FAFSA, your home is not included. In the CSS profile, the form is. And again, there's about 300-ish schools that use the CSS profile. So if your student is applying to one of those schools and you're kind of in this border, you might want to, understand what questions are on that type of form and how you might be assessed in terms of whether or not you're going to get financial aid, because although those types of schools tend to be more generous, they're also asking a lot more questions to really get under the hood of your finances and really understand what's going on. Okay, let me keep going. So here's again how all these numbers come together. The example on the left is a family that has a SAI of 30,000. And remember what I mentioned, that depending on the different schools that you apply to, at one school you might have need, and another school you might not have need, or one school you have a lot of need, and another school you don't have as much need, because it depends on your cost of attendance. So at the first school here, the cost of attendance is 50,000. So this family has a need of 20,000. At the second school, it's a much more expensive school. The same family has a $50,000 need. So this just shows that this particular family is eligible for need-based aid, but what we don't know is, at these schools, do they actually give need-based aid? Just because a family has the need doesn't mean that the college has the funds, or that's the way that they give out their money. So we've got to find two things. We've got to understand, do you have financial need at the school? And then what's basically, I call it the financial aid, giving philosophy of that school. Is that school giving money to families that have financial need to cover their gap? So that's the first example on the left. The example on the right is a family with a much higher SAI, 90,000. And so you can see at the first school, which was what the example I kind of gave as I talked through this, this family has no need because their SAI is 90,000. It is way above the cost of attendance of this school at 40,000. So if their student applies to this school, the college is either going to expect that they can pay the full 40,000, or if it's a school that offers merit scholarships and the student is a strong student, the college might say, hey, you don't have need-based aid, but we want to attract your students, so we're going to give them merit scholarship money because we want them to come to our school. And then the same thing might happen in the case, in the example at the far right. It's also a school, now it's still a more expensive school. It's a school that's $80,000, and this family is still not going to be offered need-based aid. But if this is a school that offers merit scholarships, the school could offer the student merit scholarships. Okay, so, and here's just one more example to show where your budget fits in. So again, regardless of everything that I just described, whether or not you have need or whether or not you don't have need, you should understand what your budget is relative to the cost of the college. Here's the example of this family has an SAI of 90,000. So at most schools, they're not going to receive any need-based aid, but their budget's 45,000. So that means that they either have to look for colleges where the cost of attendance is $45,000 or less if they want to make their budget, or they have to look for colleges where they feel that there's a strong likelihood that their student is going to get merit scholarships, and the merit scholarship will bring down the cost of attendance closer to their budget. And in the example here, potentially maybe the student also takes out loans. So in this case, they have to be very selective about finding the right colleges where their student might be eligible for merit scholarships. Okay, so we're on to talking about merit scholarships and then the common data set, and then I think that hopefully this has all come together. So quickly, if you haven't already gotten the idea, merit scholarships are in some cases truly a scholarship where your student, is selected, they're filling out an application, they're writing an extra essay, and it's a competitive situation. In other cases, a lot of colleges are kind of using merit scholarships as just a tuition discount. So, and again, looking at the numbers on the common data set, we're going to be able to start to see this. So some colleges give a discount to almost everybody who doesn't have any need-based aid. Other colleges are much more selective as to who they give their merit scholarship money to. So that's what we're going to kind of figure out by looking at the common data set. So merit money is not based on your financial need. It's going to really be based on the student's academic or some sort of talent that they might have. In a lot of cases, colleges are using merit scholarships to attract a stronger student to their college. The most well-known case study of this is University of Alabama. They've been doing this for 10 plus years, where they give very generous merit scholarships to out-of-state students with very strong scores. And over the years, because of this draw that they've had of really offering very high scholarships to top students that might have gone to, in some cases, maybe Ivy League schools or other strong schools, they have attracted those students to University of Alabama. Over time, they have raised the profile, and they basically did this all through merit scholarships. And using the merit scholarships to attract that stronger student who probably might not honestly had considered University of Alabama, but when they factor in the scholarships and they kind of think about the ROI of attending, it all of a sudden becomes a much more attractive school. The other benefit of merit scholarships, as in comparison to when I talked a little bit about private scholarships, is that merit scholarships are renewable. So, and that's why it is so important to get them as part of the incoming freshman process. You can get merit scholarships, once you're at the school, but the majority of money for merit scholarships is used in the admissions process. So if your student is awarded a merit scholarship as part of the admissions process, they will have it from freshman year to senior year as long as they satisfy whatever potential requirements there are. And Sometimes the requirements are pretty minor. It could be that your student just has a 3.0 each year. Other times, and this is a little tricky, the colleges might maybe purposely make that requirement high, if it could be a 3.5, and you have to feel comfortable that your student is going to be able to make whatever the GPA requirement is that's part of that merit scholarship, because you want them to obviously continue to receive the money. The worst case is that your family sends your student to a college and that college was affordable because your student got merit scholarships, and then somewhere in the 4 years they lose the merit scholarship because they couldn't meet the minimum requirement. So it's usually not an issue, but I always kind of say it is something to be aware of, because you just don't want to be in that situation where a student loses a merit scholarship and all of a sudden that affordable school becomes unaffordable because they might have lost a $30,000 grant. So somebody's asking, are merit scholarships generally for all 4 years or for the first year? As I mentioned, they are usually for all 4 years, but whatever the dollar amount is that you're offered, like if it's 20,000, what they're sharing with you is the yearly dollar amount. So if your student got a merit scholarship of 20,000, that's going to be for each year. But if they're offered it as an incoming freshman, they will, in theory, have that scholarship all 4 years, as long as they meet whatever the requirement is that the college sets for that scholarship. So these are just buckets of merit scholarships or categories that honestly we've made up. They're not official, but it just kind of helps people understand the different types of merit scholarships that are out there. There are merit scholarships that I call automatic. And what that means is your student doesn't have to do anything in addition to apply for the merit scholarship. All they have to do is apply to the college, and these colleges are looking at everybody who has applied and seeing whether or not they're eligible for the merit scholarships that college is offering. Sometimes these colleges tend to be a little bit more transparent with the amount of money that they're offering in merit scholarships. They might have a grid on their website where actually, I have here's an example from Miami University. This is from last fall, the grid that was on Miami University. So they were very clear. If your student had a certain GPA, they had the potential of, and depending on whether they were a resident or a non-resident, they could get, anywhere starting at a scholarship at $4,000 or a scholarship at $15,000. So Miami University of Ohio was very transparent. And so this is helpful because you can know in advance, before your student even applies, if your student had that weighted GPA that was in that range. You could now estimate, okay, if my student applies, this is automatic, and we can factor in or estimate that there's a good chance that he or she will get $15,000, and whatever the out-of-state cost is of Miami University, you can now estimate that your cost will be $15,000 less. So that's how you can start to estimate what your cost will be before your student even hits that submit button. You should have a general idea of what a college costs. You cannot get exact, but you should have a range, honestly, between making estimations like this and doing the college's net price calculator. You should be within $5,000 of what that college could potentially cost you. The only other thing I usually like to point out about the example from Miami University is that in this case, Miami University made it clear that they were using a school's weighted GPA. A lot of colleges actually tend to use the unweighted GPA. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you know what version of the GPA or the SAT or the ACT that college is using, because you don't want to be assuming that I had a situation where a student thought they were going to get the highest category of a scholarship because they were using their weighted GPA and not knowing that the colleges actually use the unweighted GPA to award the scholarships. If it's unclear on a website, which it may be for a lot of colleges, ask the college. Ask them, how do you determine who gets merit scholarships? And I just want to make sure, are you using a weighted GPA and unweighted GPA. Are you using SAT scores or not? And sometimes they will actually accept a student, maybe give you an initial merit scholarship, but actually also allow your student to keep taking the SAT or ACT and submit it like in February or March to potentially get a higher level of merit. So ask, as many questions as you feel you need to get all the information to understand how the colleges that your student is interested might be awarding merit scholarships. Okay. Oh, let me just go back quickly. So, that's what I would call automatic. There are a lot of colleges that have more competitive merit scholarships, and what usually happens in these cases is there is, in a lot of cases, another essay, another application that your student might have to fill out. And a lot of colleges make that clear from the beginning of the admissions process. Like if you are applying to the honors college at this school, which maybe has the potential of getting you an extra, $7,000 or $5,000 in scholarships, you'll need to fill out this additional form, and you'll need to write an additional essay. So look for all of that information and make sure that your student understands if there's additional work that needs to get done to apply for an application, so apply for a scholarship. So that's one case. Another thing to really keep track of, and that's my line down here, is keeping track of deadlines. Some colleges have different deadlines for when applications for scholarships are due. Some colleges actually require that a student apply as part of early action to be eligible for scholarships. So honestly, these are kind of some of the incentives, you could say, that colleges are using because they want students to apply early, because it helps them in their processing. It helps them understand kind of like who might commit, or who what the caliber of students are out there. So there might be actually even more colleges this year that are saying, we offer merit scholarships, but we're going to offer more merit scholarships if you apply early. And again, no harm in asking that, even if it's not anywhere on the website. You can ask, does the college have a policy of awarding extra or additional merit scholarships if I apply early? We just did a session with a former dean last night. We had a webinar that talked about early decision, early action, and she was very blunt and said a lot of colleges are doing that, maybe even more this year. She's actually the interim dean at Muhlenberg this year, and she said they're offering, I think it's additional $2,500 if you apply early. So I wish that there was like some central source that we could all go to that told us all this information. Unfortunately, there isn't. You just have to be you and your student have to be really diligent about scouring the school's website and asking the admissions officer, is there anything else that you should know about for applying? Okay, so let's get to the common data set. So the common data set is a set of information or data, tons of data that the colleges actually came together. I don't honestly remember how many years ago, probably 20 or so years ago, and said, we're actually, the way it really happened was that U.S. News and World Report wanted this information so that they can do their rankings. And so I actually think it was the opposite. They went to the colleges and said, if you fill out this form, this common form, and you give us this data, we'll do this ranking system, and then you will get publicity because, we'll sell tons of magazines, and this is in the era of magazines, and we'll give you that badge that you can put on your website or wherever. So that's how this really started. And there's really 3 sources now that collect this information. The College Board is in on this, and they get the common data set information from colleges. U.S. News and World Report, because they were the ones who started this. And then there's a company called Peterson's who actually compiles all of this data from colleges, and then they license it out to all the websites that use this data. honestly, that's the way we get our data. It is through licensing it from Peterson's. And there's tons of different data that you can license. Some colleges or some websites use all of it. Some have used some of it. I've kind of honestly been it's kind of intriguing to see some websites use a little bit of it, some use more, but I'll show you what we use. But those are really the only three places that you can get the data. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to skip this. I don't know why that we don't need that. Okay, so every most colleges, I don't want to say every because there's a handful that don't put it out there, but I'd say 98% of colleges share their common data set publicly on their website. So you can Google any college. In my example here is Tulane, and just Google Tulane University Common Data Set. You'll probably get to a page on the college website similar to this. Well, they'll list their most recent common data set, and then they'll list maybe 10 years back the common data sets. You can look at past ones, but there's so much information. Most people just look at the most recent one. Let me just explain a little bit about the naming convention of the common data set. So the most recent one is the 2024-2025 common data set. So what that means is that it covers so the 2025 is the year that the freshmen started. So I'm sorry, I'm not explaining this well. Let me back up 1 second. The common data set is released usually sometime between the spring and the summer. So the 2024-25 common data set was just released this past, some colleges had it out there in May, but most of them kind of put it out there in July. And the reason why they don't put it out until July is it takes them a time to gather the data. So the data is based on students that have started college in the fall of 2025, right? So they had to wait until those students actually enrolled, and then they had to wait until they got all the data from the different departments and then compiled it, and then they sent it to one of the places like Peterson's or U.S. News and World Report. So it takes a little bit of time. And so the students that started college in 2025, the admissions data that is part of the common data set is based on when those students went through the application process, which was in 2024. So I just want to make that clear that nobody has all of the admissions data for the students who just went through it last year or this past year, because it's not in any common data set yet. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing and jump to show you an actual common data set. Okay, let me move this and share. Okay, so can you guys see? I actually just put into Google University of Kentucky Common Data Set. Okay, and usually the first one that comes up is the actual college's website. And just like Tulane, you can see they have all these common data sets going back. So let's look at the most recent one, 2024, 2025. I don't even like how many sections there are. I mean, I think there's like up to section J. So there's A through J are the different sections. I'm not going to go through every section because it's just too much information. I'm going to skip to the 2 or 3 sections that I look at the most and I think you'll get the most information from. The first is, as it's titled, general information. The second one is like the number of students who are actually enrolling this past fall. But the first important section I think most people will get the most information at is this admission section, section C. So you can see here the first line, and actually let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Okay. It says here, this data is based on the first-year students who enrolled full or part-time. Oh, actually, I'm wrong. Sorry. Let's see. In the fall of 2024. Hmm. Okay. I have to check on that. I feel like that's off. I feel like that's a mistake, to tell you the truth. I will check on that after. You know what? Let's pull up one more. Let's go to Tulane's common data set. And let's go. uh, Let's go to section C here. Okay. I have to think about this. Maybe I explained that to you incorrectly about the dates. Okay, sorry about that. I'll have to go back and think. Okay. Who applied? Okay, that's what it is. That's what's throwing me off. These are for the students, the first year students who enrolled and were admitted, but they applied in the fall of 2024. Okay. Um, so here are all their application numbers. They split them out by male versus female. These are number of men who applied, number of students, of women who applied, then of those who were admitted, and then you can this is how the admission rates are calculated using these numbers. Here they also show, because the University of Kentucky is a public school, they're showing how many in-state students applied and were accepted versus how many out-of-state students, how many international students were accepted. So here's where all of these admission numbers actually come from. And then there's another section here, which I actually think is like a little piece of that gets overlooked. It's called admission factors. It's this section C7. And this is like a little bit of a rubric that the college is telling you about what's important to them when they are evaluating a student's application. So most colleges are going to obviously have the rigor of the school record as most important. So, what type of hard classes your student is taking. They're going to say that the GPA, of course, is important, and that's most important. And in this case, they're saying essay is very important. Is very important. You might actually see in some colleges where they say the essay is just important, not very important. And what's interesting here is that, and we're seeing this much more, that colleges are not putting any importance on class rank. Here you can see here that it's all the way down in the considered category, which really is not very important at all. Here, University of Kentucky is saying, even though they're test optional, but tests are just considered. There are some schools, actually, if I flip to Tulane, where Tulane is test optional, but Tulane marks standardized test scores as still being important. So again, that's a little clue that even though they're test optional, they are still putting an importance on evaluating a test score if a student submits it. So this is a little bit of a clue into the different factors that colleges use or telling you what's important or what's more important or what's less important when they're evaluating a student's application. There's another factor here. Why it's not here? Oh, here, it's down here. Level of an applicant's interest. University of Kentucky is saying that doesn't matter to them. They don't care. I mean, on some level, they're not factoring that into their review, whether or not how interested a student is in their college. But some colleges, this is where the term demonstrated interest comes. Some colleges, this is important to them. So again, I think it's Tulane if we were to look at that. Tulane feels that the level of a student's interest is important. And so what that means is that if they're down to comparing a few different students, and maybe the students are very similar in a lot of ways, but one student has shown a lot more interest than another because they have, sent an email, they have come on a school tour, or they have they've gone to an information session online. Colleges are tracking all of that these days, And so if a college is telling you that that's important, your student should make some effort to show that they have an interest in that college. So this is everything that's going on in this section. And then it also includes information about the test scores. Here's another important section these days. This is actually somewhat new. I think in the past few years, it's been added to the common data set. So here, colleges are telling you what percent of students who were accepted also submitted their test scores. So even though this is kind of interesting, even though University of Kentucky said that the test score is not very important to them, it turns out that 50% of the students who were accepted actually sent in their ACT. So this isn't the most purest of data because it's not telling you how many students applied and submitted their test scores, but it's giving you a clue. If you can imagine that 50% of the students who ended up being accepted and enrolled submitted their test scores, you can only imagine that probably a higher percentage of the students who applied also submitted their test scores. So this is becoming important data to look at when your student is making that decision about whether to submit their test score or not. Of course, you don't want to share a test score that's not so as strong, but you should know how many or get a sense of how many students are actually submitting their test score. Here's the data related to the different percentiles of test scores. For merit, we use the 75th percentile because colleges have told us that if they're giving merit scholarship money to a student, they want that student to be strong academically, and a student that has a test score in that 75th percentile is one factor that tells them that they are a stronger academic student compared to the other students that normally come to that college. So that's a piece of data that we use in our platform and that you can use, if you're trying to find those colleges where your student has a stronger chance of being offered merit. Okay, so lots more data here. Here's GPA information. Let's skip down. My next important section is actually section H. Section H. I'll just say this is section F, student life. You just want to know like how many, if fraternities, sororities are important, how many, what percentage of the student population are in those activities, and how many students live off campus, things like that. So this is valuable information. But let's go to financial aid, section H. In this section, this is where they tell you how much money they give out in need-based aid, how much money they give out in merit scholarships. So here it is, this chart. So this chart is saying line A is the number of students who, in this first column, it's freshmen, number of students who basically enrolled that year. So 6,360. This is for freshmen. Then it looks at number of students of the 6,360 who applied for need-based aid. Now remember, just because you applied, it doesn't mean that you actually have need-based aid, but you basically are filling out an application saying, I want to be reviewed to see if I have need-based aid. So about 5,400 students applied, and then of those 5,400, 3,600 were determined to have financial need, and that's back to the calculation that we talked about. That's the cost of attendance minus the SAI. So 3,600 of these students who applied actually had financial need. And then of the students who had financial need, how many of them were actually given any sort of need-based aid? So that's of the 3,600, about 3,500, so a little less, were actually given need-based aid money. And then, let's see, but just because they were given money doesn't mean that they were given enough need-based aid to cover their full financial need. So here's the percentage. So Kentucky, University of Kentucky says, we will cover, of the people who we gave need-based aid to, we will cover, let's say, 59% of whatever their need is. So if your need is $30,000, you're not getting the full $30,000 in need-based aid. You're getting 59% of that need-based aid is what Kentucky is offering you. So you're still going to have a gap to cover your costs at University of Kentucky. And the average need-based aid award was $17,000. So you can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together here. You will know whether or not you have any sort of need-based aid if you apply to University of Kentucky. And then whatever your financial need is, you can now start to estimate you're only going to get maybe 59% of that need covered. So now you'll understand what Kentucky might cost you and how much of a gap you're going to have to fill by potentially getting federal loans or private loans. Okay, so that's for need-based aid. Next chart is for merit scholarships. So first line here is how many number of students in line A was the total number of students that were enrolled, who didn't have financial need. How many of those students were awarded any sort of need-based aid? So 2,267 students who didn't have financial need were given some other merit scholarship money, okay? And on average, the merit scholarship money they were awarded was $8,345. So again, now you can start to estimate if your family doesn't have financial need at University of Kentucky, you have the chance of your student getting merit scholarship. On average, the merit scholarship is going to be $8,345. But that money is actually going to be given on average to the student that falls into the 75th percentile. So that's how all of these numbers start to come together. So I'm going to skip over. So this is every college, a lot of colleges have the common data set. You can pull up any college and see how these numbers compare. But if you want a simpler way of doing that, this is why we created our platform called Insights. And we have all the data that I just showed you in Insights, so you don't have to go to the college's individual common data set. Plus, in addition, you can filter and say, hey, show me the colleges that offer $10,000 of merit or more. Now you can kind of do the reverse lookup and you don't have to go to each college's website to look at their individual numbers. So, but out of curiosity, let's just look at, I'll show you how this platform works in a second, but I'm just going to pull up University of Kentucky because we just looked at their common data set. And there's something I want to show you. Okay, so this is it's not every piece of data that is on the common data set, but it's the pieces of data that we find that we think are most valuable. So let's actually, I'm going to skip to the column. Okay, here's the column that says this is the average merit award that is given to a freshman that doesn't have any need. We saw that number on the common data set, $8,345. But what we also have is we've crowdsourced offers from families. As their students get offers, they share that information with us. It's called Compare Offers. And what it allows them to do is if they share an offer, they can see what other students at the same college were also given, what type of money that they were offered. So the families can compare, hey, was I given like a similar amount to somebody else, or maybe I was given less, and so then I might actually go to the college and appeal and ask for more money. But what's interesting here, and I just actually stumbled on this today, is I saw that Kentucky had, their average amount is $8,345. But if you look at what people told us, okay, and I'm just going to let's just look at last year. And we have this data going back for like, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years. So let's look at last year's crowdsourced data. That was from, oops, sorry. It was from 20, yeah. Okay. So this was students who applied this past year and just are going to start college this fall in 2025. And so if you look at how much merit they were offered, here, let me actually put, show more of the offers. So there were a lot of students. I mean, a fair number of students. Here, let's actually sort this. Um, oops, sorry. Okay, there it goes. So a fair number of students, actually some students didn't get anything. Some students got $5,000, but then you actually see a fair number of students that got 10,000, 12,000, 12,050, 13,000, 22,000. I'm not 100% sure that this person really got 50,000, but I doubt it now that I look at their numbers. But I think all the other numbers are pretty credible. And so what this is kind of saying is even though their average dollar amount on the common data set was like $8,400, it's an average, right? So there's going to be some students who get less and some students who get more. And you can see here that there were definitely a fair number of students who got more. And if you look, they tended to give more money to the students who were out of state, which makes sense. They also if you look, they also were giving it to students who applied earlier. So this is just the benefit of the information that we've compiled, because these are actual offers that families have shared with us, and you can kind of like compare that versus the common data set information that colleges share. Okay, so let me show you a little bit about how this platform works. So if you sign up, and you can sign up for a free account, and I'll just put in, here's the website. If you sign up for a free account, you get a little like sample of being able to do some of these things. But you, depending on what year of high school you are, we kind of just show you, this is just articles that we've written that we think that are important. These are like the different steps that you should take if you're a class of 2026. Make sure you have a budget. That's what we talked about. These are tips about how you build your college list. How do you submit FAFSA? So these are all important steps that you should do this year, this senior year. Then there's a section, this is where you would save the lists that you create, and I'll show you how you would create a list. This section, actually, we're going to release it this week, but this section will help you keep track of the different colleges that your student is applying to and the deadlines. And then when you actually get offers to share, this is where you could add your offer. Then you would see other students' offers, and you can compare to see whether or not you think that the offer your student got is good enough relative to what other students are receiving. So it's kind of, these are like these are the stages of the process. You need to apply, you need to do your research, you need to keep track and making sure that your student's applying. And then when you get an offer, you're going to want to share it and compare to see how it stacks up against other students. And then these other sections down here is we have lots of webinars that we do. I kind of mentioned the one that we did with the CEO of NAFSA. We do lots of webinars on student loans, about the different trends in college admissions. So this is just a library of where you can see all of the content that we share. We actually also have some tip sheets in here. I'll just show you like some, this is, just quick tips on how to get student loans. This is a free test prep platform. So there's lots of good content in the library. And then the last two sections are if you want one-on-one help, we have different services. And then we have deals with different partners that we offer to families. Okay, but let me go and show you how you can use the data, because that's what's most important. So this is kind of like a spreadsheet view of all the colleges that we have. We have 3,925 colleges with lots of different columns of data. And then you can filter, you can use any of the pieces of data to filter the colleges. So here's a type of filter that I like to do. So here's the field average merit award for freshmen without need. So I want to find a college that is, actually here, let's do greater than or equal to, that is offering a merit scholarship that of $10,000 or more. Okay? And I want to find it at schools where I know my child maybe got a 1350 on their SAT. So I want to find the schools where the 1350 is in the 75th percentile or higher. So I want to find a 75th percentile that's between, let's say, 1300 to 1400, because that kind of is where it puts my child. So that, and I might put other criteria. I might want to pick a particular major that they're interested in. I might want to put particular regions. But in all honesty, I encourage people to start kind of broad and just see where are these colleges that are offering merit, and where is my students, like, academics, where does it make them a strong candidate? And let's apply these filters. Okay, so from those two filters, we've kind of narrowed it to 140 colleges that offer $10,000 or more in merit, and where my student, at least their SAT scores, makes them a strong candidate. And you can now kind of look at all these colleges. Here, let's increase. We can look at 50 colleges at a time. You can sort any of these columns, in ascending or descending order. I like to let's go to the column that we were looking at earlier. This is the average merit award. This is basically the amount of merit that these schools are offering. And I can sort this. Let's see if this will sort. Maybe a little delay. Okay, so this is sorting in ascending order. And now I can scroll through and see, okay, who's generous. I know by default that my student has a strong likelihood of getting merit because they're falling into the 75th percentile, because that's one of the criteria I had here. Here, it might be hard to see. It says 75th percentile is between 1300 and 1400. And now this is where I might want to, kind of research these colleges, because I know I can get merit scholarship money. We also have this column here that says net cost after average merit award. This right now only applies to private schools, because we know, more easily if a college says that they're going to award this amount of merit scholarships, that the private schools only have, one cost of attendance. The public schools have in-state and out-of-state. So we're working on kind of adding that in. But right now, this column only applies to private. So I can now see what my net cost might be if my student gets merit scholarship money at these colleges. Actually, let's sort this column. Okay. So, and this might be our mistake here. We have some negative numbers, and all that means is that, yeah, we actually haven't filled in the private cost of attendance at those colleges. So we will make that correction. But you can see here that, Augustina University has a private cost of attendance of 51,000. If my student gets the merit scholarship, which is about 29,000, my net cost would be $22,000. So this is how now you can start to use this data to find colleges that might fit your budget, regardless of what your SAI is. And then you can save any of these colleges. I'll just pick Augustina. You can create, I actually, as you can see, I have created a lot of different lists. You can name your lists anything you want. You can add colleges to existing lists. And then when you narrow things down, you can go to the section that says My Lists. And now, if you wanted to, you can look at just the ones that you might have, put together for certain criteria. So I have a list here that colleges with the most merit. So now I can look at just those colleges if I want to kind of dig in further. And if you, actually, this feature isn't here yet. It will be here this week. It's part of the tracking of applications. But when you change the status on the college and say you're applying, it actually will put it into that section of the dashboard that says applications, and then you'll actually be able to add notes if you want to put in particular notes about that college, maybe it has a special major your student is interested in, maybe it has a special deadline you need to be aware of. So it just helps you to keep track of any information you might have found out about that college. So I went pretty long. Let me see what questions we might have, but hopefully this was helpful for people. Oh, here's my chat. Okay, so I'm just going to start from the bottom, the ones who kind of left questions most recently. And I'll go backwards. Will this merit aid award number be the same or similar when you fill in the net price calculator at each university on the school's website? I think it should be close. I can't say for sure. I haven't, had the chance recently to be running a lot of net price calculators, but again, the merit award number that I just looked at and what's in Insights is an average. So it depends on how sophisticated the net price calculator is at the college. If it's a very sophisticated net price calculator, they might give you a more specific number, which might be, above the average because they are asking you more information. But a lot of them are probably using their average number, and it probably, correlates to what they shared in the common data set. I'll go back. Okay, here. I'll go back, Robin, in a second, and I'll show you how to create a new list. But because let me go through some of the questions, and then I'll bring the screen back up. So what's the best approach for asking for more money before or after admissions during application? Don't ask for more money until your student gets the offer. Then you can go back and ask for more money. They're not going to be interested in talking to you about more money until they've sent acceptances and they've sent out award information. So that's honestly later in the process, usually in the February through April timeframe. Are we going to get today's webinar video as a copy? Yes, tomorrow we will send this an email to everybody, and there'll be a link in the recording. Okay, I am a member, would like to learn how to navigate Insights. That's fine. Is there an email to contact? Anybody and everybody tonight, you can send me an email at debbie@road2college.com or at support@road2college.com. Eleanor, I will go back to sharing the screen. We have a really quick tutorial, but we can create another one that's maybe more in depth. So if you go to the library, there it is. It's a category called Insights, Help, and Office Hours. If you're a member, we have monthly office hours, but so that's what these are. What to look for? Let's see. Oh, you know what? I don't see it here, but as soon as I get off, I will upload our tutorial on how to use Insights, and it would be in that category of Insights, Help, and Office Hours. Somebody asked how to create a new list. Let's go to the Discover. Here, so I'll just pick like 3 or 4 colleges. You have to check mark which colleges you want, and then it says add selected to list, and then the top line item here says create new list. So that's one way of you can create a list. If you also kind of if you're going and looking at the colleges one by one like this, there's a button at the upper right that says add to list, and there's also an opportunity that says add new list. So that's the way you can create a new list. Okay, let me stop sharing. Let me go back to the chat. Does CDA differentiate average merit award between in-state and out-of-state applications? I'm assuming CDA Common Data Set or CDS. It doesn't. it doesn't separate out merit awards between in-state and out-of-state. And so that's why we're still thinking about how we want to display that. If you're a private college, there is no in-state and out-of-state. Like, everybody's kind of treated the same for merit scholarships. But that's why I found it so interesting. If you look sometimes at the crowdsource data and look at the merit scholarships that the families are actually reporting versus what the college has said in the common data set. That's why I picked University of Kentucky, to show you that University of Kentucky said, what was it, like 8,300 was the average merit award that they were offering. They don't tell you, are they offering more or less to in-state versus out-of-state. Most public colleges, if they're offering merit scholarship, are offering a higher amount to out-of-state students. And then you could go to the crowdsource offers and you could clearly see that the out-of-state students were getting, honestly, $7,000, $10,000, $12,000. So they were on the higher end. How can you find when you get both need and merit-based aid? You can, so if you're a family that might have financial need, but you have a strong student, so you think you might get merit scholarships, well, you need to find those colleges, and you can do it in the filter, that give a high percentage of, here, let me go show you, to quickly show you what that data is. Okay, so if you go to Discover, I'm going to clear this filter. Okay, so, oops, let me clear that. Okay, so one of the filters here is percent of need met. That was that percent number that was in the common data set. So if you are a family that has financial need, you want to find a college that's going to offer as much as, it's going to meet as high a percentage of your need as possible. So let's just do a search or a filter that says, I want to find the schools that have a percentage need that is greater than or equal to, let's say, 80%. 80. And then I also want to find the schools that have or that are offering a merit scholarship amount, let's say greater than or equal to $10,000. Okay. And now let's see what shows up. Okay, wow. 344 colleges are in that category. Let's just look at some of the numbers. So let's sort this. So yeah, so I mean, can't say I've heard of all of these schools, but University of Idaho is claiming that they can meet 83% of a family's financial need, and they give out a merit scholarship on average of a little over $10,000. So you can now go through this. Kind of interesting how this one snuck through. Oh, I actually have to say that the filtering is not, it's an or right now. Right now, the way the filtering out is probably it found colleges where the percent need met is greater than 80,000, or there's a merit scholarship of $10,000 or more. So, but it's still helpful because you can kind of look through and see which of those, if you sort the different columns, you can see which colleges, offer both. Like, again, Wheeling University, not sure I know much about it, offers 100%, covers 100% of, oh wait, sorry, I'm looking at the, oh, here it is, need net. I was looking at the wrong column. It's percent need met. So Wheeling University covers 91% of the need met, and then they offer $12,000 in merit scholarships. One other trick you can do is under the columns section, you can hide columns. So let's say this is too much information for you. There's like 5 columns that you think are most important. You can hide all the other columns and you could just get a view of just your 5 colleges. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Let's see. Oops, I just spilled my tea. Okay. Okay. Can you get all the common data set in one place, or do you have to go to each college's website? Honestly, I mean, there aren't many search places where you can get as much of the common data set information as we have in Insights. Again, that's the reason why we created it. Other than that, I mean, some websites do have common data set information. I will tell you that the College Board, Big Future, they use common data set information, but for whatever reason, but they don't have these filtering capabilities, and they don't share all of this data. I don't know why. Um, uh, but we picked the data that we think is most important to help people get to the colleges where, honestly, they would be most affordable. So you should give Insights a try, because that's probably where you get the most common data set information in one place. Okay, yes, the Ivy League. Somebody just made the statement, the Ivy League does not give merit scholarship. What the Ivy League is very generous with is for families that have financial need. They are kind of one of the few groups of colleges that will cover 100% of your need. So going back to that formula, cost of attendance minus your SAI. If your SAI is, $10,000, Ivy Leagues are expensive now. Let's say the cost of attendance is 90,000. Your need is 80,000. That Ivy League will cover and give you $80,000 of aid. You still have to come up with your 10,000, which is the SAI, but that's where those colleges are very generous for, quite honestly, lower income families that have strong students. So they have become tough places for middle class families to afford, because the middle class family is not going to be eligible usually for aid. And if you're not eligible for aid, then those types of schools are expecting that you pay the full cost of attendance, which, is at 90 plus thousand or more, is a very expensive education. So somebody's saying, I have found some schools like Princeton that do not fill out the common data set section 2A for non-need based scholarships. Is it left blank? I checked several years of common data set. What does this mean? Doug, I wish I had a better answer. This is nobody. I just wish the colleges were transparent. Nobody is forcing the colleges to share this information. So if they choose not to, they choose not to. You can call the admissions office and ask them for the information, but one way of the colleges kind of like keeping secrets is by not sharing all of their data. So if they share it, we have it. If they don't, it's kind of really hard to twist their arm to get it out of them. But I will say, of course, you're probably interested in a school like Princeton, and maybe they're not sharing it all. The majority of colleges do share a lot, but for a long time, Columbia didn't even share their common data set at all. We were just looking at last night, working with the former dean, who actually was a former admissions officer at Colby College. She didn't even realize, because it was a while back that she worked there. She pulled up the common data set, or tried to pull up the common data set for Colby College, and Colby College wasn't sharing their common data set. So yes, there are a handful of colleges, honestly, I would say 5 or less, that do not share their common data set. And then there are some that share their common data set, but maybe don't share all the information. I wish I had a better answer, but that's just what's happening these days. Okay. Oh, this is a very good point. So Carrie is saying, beware of the admission semester. They have a rising senior who's graduating early in December. She recently learned that merit scholarships at some colleges or some schools on their list are only for fall enrollees, and first-time students enrolling in the spring are ineligible. Again, this depends on the school. You're absolutely right. It does depend on the school. That I would say the majority of merit scholarship money that colleges are offering are for students who are enrolling in the fall. I will say though that some colleges, because they're trying to spread out, they're trying to actually enlarge their freshman class, but not have them all come in the fall. So some colleges are actually doing what you're saying, Carrie, for a different purpose. They are taking the student who might be ready to enroll in the fall and saying, we'll actually give you a special merit scholarships if you start college in the second semester. So that this is all kind of new stuff that colleges are doing. So you might come across that. And again, unfortunately, it is school by school. So just really kind of dig in and ask as many questions as possible to admissions offices. Are there many college schools that offer a free ride regardless of need? There might be a few. There are very, very few these days that are offering full ride scholarships. That's what they're called. There's full tuition scholarships where they're covering your tuition. Full ride college scholarship is covering, tuition, room, and board. Are there colleges that offer it? Yes, they are rare. How do you reflect things like extraordinary medical expenses, which might make the reality of your ability to pay different than what the SAI reflects? I guess this is going back to the question about the formula for SAI. So something that what you're talking about, medical expenses, is a special circumstance that you unfortunately can't include in the FAFSA when you fill out the FAFSA in the fall, but it is a reason why you can appeal your students' award in the winter and springtime. So if there are things, extraordinary expenses, particularly like medical expenses, that are just not going to be clear, in what the questions are, the data that the FAFSA asks for, that is the purpose for the appeal process, or one of the major purposes, is that you will fill out the form and make it clear to the college that my ability to pay isn't really accurately reflected in the FAFSA information because I have these other expenses that could not be shared. And that's very common. It happens a lot. Okay, I think I kind of went back pretty far. Let me just see if there's any new questions. Will it be that students have less chance of acceptance when they need financial aid merit? Is there a list of need blind, need aware schools? So what this question is saying is schools kind of can be categorized into what would be need aware or need blind. So need blind schools claim that they truly do not look at a family's finances when they make the decision of whether or not the student is accepted. Those schools tend to be schools with very good endowments, although there's a lot going on in higher ed these days, so I don't know what's happening with the schools' endowments, but and they tend to be the more selective schools that say we're need blind. So I don't have the full list in front of me, but I'm going to say honestly, maybe there's like 15 to 10 of those type of schools that are truly need blind. The Ivy League schools fall into it. There could be what I would call like adjacent Ivy League schools that are like that. And basically, they are not looking at the student's finances or the family's finances when they make that admission decision. Majority of schools these days are need aware. And it's just a financial fact that they have to basically manage their budgets. They can't kind of they can't accept every student who might have a big financial need, and they can't accept every student and give them, a really large merit scholarship. So a lot of schools these days, are aware of how much financial aid a family might need, and it may impact the decision. How it might impact it is that if you're, and I used to have this chart, I didn't show it in this presentation, but like a chart that basically shows how much need you might have on like one axis, and the other axis is how strong your student is academically. So if your student is maybe just like average for that school, and you have a lot of need, well, that might impact the student's chances of being accepted, because that college is saying, okay, it's a student, that we could accept, but they have a lot of need. So we might actually look at another student who doesn't have as much need, because then our budgets could spread further. Or they might say, if we're going to give that much need to a student, that it needs to be an exceptional student. So they might look for a student who's much stronger, um, uh, and make that type of decision. So how much need your family, has may unfortunately become part of, a factor in the admissions decision. The reality is that, a college only has so much money, and so they don't have unlimited funds, and they also don't want to accept a student who might not be able to afford the 4 years, because they don't want to see a student, drop out for their sake and for the college's sake and for the student's sake, partway through college. Okay, how about last question? Because that's a long night. So somebody's saying, what are other common reasons to appeal your financial aid offer package? We do a whole session on this in January, February, March, but I'll give you the quick rundown. There's two reasons why, or two categories of why families would appeal. One are financial, that like something has significantly changed in their financial picture as compared to the information that was in the FAFSA. It could be because medical expenses, it could be a loss of a job, it could be, unfortunately, the death of a parent. There have obviously even been years where there's been natural disasters that have impacted a family's finances. So if there's been a significant change in your family's financial situation, that is definitely a category and a reason why a lot of families appeal. The second is a little bit more from the merit side. If your student has gotten merit scholarship offers from several colleges, and the college that your student ultimately wants to go to maybe is not giving the best merit offer, you could appeal and say, hey, my student's really interested in attending, but they got an offer of 10,000, and another school that we are seriously also considering gave them an offer of 20,000. Would you consider increasing? And that happens a lot, and colleges, do change their mind and increase merit scholarship offers. So those are like kind of like the two big branches of why a family might appeal. Okay, so somebody's asking, in the Common App, can your student choose schools they want to apply to without asking financial need, as when they submit FAFSA, all schools will see the need? I think that there's a question that on the Common App that says, will you be applying for financial aid? I honestly, I just tell people to be honest. If you are going to need financial aid to afford the college, then tell them, yes, you're going to apply for financial aid. It's just, they are at that point in the application. I think that the college just wants to know, should they be expecting a FAFSA? Are they going to have to, put this student through through the financial aid process? Colleges just, they want to understand. Honestly, if you say, I don't need financial aid, and you go through the whole application process, not submitting a FAFSA, and then at the end you say, hey, you know what, I do need, and your student gets accepted, and I do need financial aid, some colleges will say, too late, you didn't tell us you needed it, and we're not, and we aren't going to offer it. So, again, I wouldn't try and game the system like that, in terms of, I'm saying I don't need aid, but I really do need aid, and I want to see if I can accept my students. It's for your benefit and for the college's benefit. If you need aid, let them know, and either they can provide it or they can't, and then you're going to have to decide whether or not you can afford the college or not. Okay, I think this was helpful for everybody. I personally love data, so I think it's really helpful to It gives you a clue as to what the colleges are doing. I hope you give our platform Insights a try, but whether or not you do it or not, I think the information that we talked about tonight is really helpful and valuable. And my advice to everybody is to do research. It's so important. Get your numbers together, get your house in order, know how much you really can afford to spend for college, and factor that into the process. There just aren't going to be loan options as much as there used to be. Of course, they will be from lenders, but you're going to have good credit to get those loans. And I have no idea what the rates are going to be next year. I think you can go in either direction. There is going to be a lot more competition in student loans, that's my opinion, next year. So that competition might put pressure on interest rates, but the opposite could happen. And, because there's going to be so much demand for loans, that the lenders might not feel the pressure to offer better rates. So just pay attention to all these numbers now, estimate what your cost is going to be before your student applies, and make sure you have enough options of different colleges at different price points, so that when your student gets offers in the winter and spring, you can compare the offers and you can go back and appeal. Okay, good night, everybody. I hope you have a good Labor Day and nice end to the summer. See you soon. Bye.